For Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
Hello there. Thanks, Ollie. Hello there, I said to you. Well, it's Thursday. It's raining cats and dogs in Salford and Greater Manchester. A rainy night in Salford, so it is. Interesting there, the International Criminal Court has sent another black African warlord to jail for 30 years. Never a white one, never a European one, never a British or an American one. Eh? Yes. All right. How you doing? It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. This is your Richie Allen Show. Let's get on with it then.
Well, bring out the gimp.
It's the Richie Allen Show. Broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
Yeah, the man's name is Bosco. You heard Ollie Barrett in the news there. Bosco Ntaganda. And he's been sentenced to 30 years in jail for crimes committed in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Yeah, what is that funny, is it, Richie? No, it's just funny that our politicians can kill millions of people, millions around the world, and, well, The Hague is not very interested in them. Right, it's me and you today. Lots to tell you about, lots to tell you. I've given you the Twitter handle. I look forward to you joining in. Fill your boots, man. Fill your boots and join in on Twitter. Love to hear from you today. Yeah, I've had some day of it. What a day I've had. If it wasn't for bad luck, I wouldn't have any luck at all. But I'm not going to get into it. I've still got a rotten sore head on me. Knocked myself out, or near as damn it, this morning. If you didn't see the newspaper review or see that YouTube nonsense that I put on every weekday morning at 9:30, well, you won't know, but I ran into a wall head first this morning. Yes, sober as a judge I was. I was sober as a Mormon judge. I was as sober as an Islamic... Yeah, I was. And I've a massive big lump on my head and a big gash. And I've just been running around today. It's just been one of those days. Listen, I had a wonderful guest lined up today called Finola Moss. And I said to Finola this afternoon, I said, listen, let's not do the show tonight. Let's do it on Tuesday, because it's very, very, very deep, very profound, and very important, that which Finola is going to talk about. And she's going to talk about people with learning disabilities being taken into residential care against the wishes of families for profit. Oh, it's huge. And I said, look, let's do it on Tuesday. I said, my old noggin is not the best this afternoon, and it deserves to be, for us to do it earlier in the week, when we're more likely to get the sort of reaction I think we'll get. Because a number of other people have got in touch with me who've had children taken into residential care, children with severe autism and other learning disabilities and such like. So Finola Moss will join the programme next week. She was due to be on today and I put her off. I said, listen, she said, what will you do? And I said, well, I'll just fly solo, because there's lots to talk about anyway, isn't there? Isn't there, I said. So there is. Right. By the way, trigger warning. Hayden, it's Thursday. So trigger warning is on YouTube tonight. It's either 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. And funnily enough, even if they say it's 9 or 10 o'clock, it's guaranteed to be 5 or 10 minutes late anyway. 10 o'clock, I think, because I was watching it last week. That's a trigger warning on YouTube, where Hayden and Graham basically take apart, deconstruct the biggest news stories of the week in their very funny, witty and very triggering style. So check that out, trigger warning, a bit later on Thursday. I'm doing the cross-promotional stuff, and I haven't even begun my own show. I know. What sort of Egypt are you, Richie? The biggest Egypt in the priesthood. That's me. So it's been a mad day again today. Both political, funny that the two main political parties have been putting up their economic heavyweights to the public. So the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Sajid Javid, and John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, have been announcing their spending plans today, and they're promising to spend hundreds of millions, indeed billions of pounds. Right? But their plans have been overshadowed by a couple of big arguments about misogyny and anti-Semitism. I know a lot about both, apparently. A former BBC radio presenter called Nick Conrad is in the firing line today because apparently at one time when he was on the BBC, he said women should keep their knickers on. Keep your knickers on, ladies. Ladies, keep those knickers on. Those panties belong on you. Don't take them off. What did he say? This guy is in the running to become a Tory MP, by the way. Well, he used to host the BBC Radio Norfolk's breakfast programme. Isn't the revolving door between the media and politics a wonderful thing these days, isn't it? Huh? Nothing to see here, please disperse. Nothing to see here, I said. Yeah, you have politicians getting their own radio programmes now, and you have radio presenters standing for Parliament. Yes, so Nick Conrad then was selected for the Broadland seat. I don't know where Broadland is. You know why? I took a massive knock to the noggin this morning and I couldn't be arsed looking it up. I couldn't bother my hairy big backside looking it up, so I don't know. Now, he was delighted to be given the opportunity to stand for the Conservative Party, but he's offered a genuine apology today for the comments that he made 5 years ago. What did he say? What did he say? Well, I'll tell you what he said. He was chairing a discussion on his programme in 2014, and he said, and I quote, and I couldn't find the audio in the BBC archives, hence I'm telling you myself, I'm reading it out verbatim. He said, I think women need to be more aware of a man's sexual desire. That when you're in that position, that you are about to engage in sexual activity, there's a huge amount of energy in the male body. There's a huge amount of will and intent, and it's very difficult for many men to say no. Women also have to understand that when a man's given certain signals, when he is given certain signals by a woman, he'll wish to act upon them. And if you don't wish to give out the wrong signals, it's best probably to keep your knickers on and not get into bed with him, says Conrad. Right. So he's ruling out that point when she's taken her knickers off. Her knickers are either on the bedside locker or they're hanging from the bedroom light lamp fixture fitting thing, or they're on the toilet or wherever. He's ruling out that once knickers are off, she can't say no. I've changed my mind, actually. I don't feel like it. It's basically what he was hinting at, God love him, the stupid Egypt. That's what he was saying, basically. Basically, if you don't want to give out the wrong signals, if you don't want to get shagged, leave your knickers on, he said. So he's apologised for the comments 5 years ago. At the time, Ofcom, the radio industry watchdog, took no action. Presumably, we didn't have as many complainers, and social media, even 5 years ago, wasn't what it is today. There you go. Here's Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister. You'll hear Boris Johnson first, and then you'll hear Conservative Party Business Minister, hope I pronounced this right, Kwasi Kwarteng. Yeah, I think I got that right. So you'll hear the Prime Minister, and then you'll hear Kwasi Kwarteng. Keep your knickers on.
Those comments are completely unacceptable. He has apologised long ago, but I cannot stress that those comments are completely unacceptable.
He made ill-judged remarks. My understanding, as you told me, was that he'd apologised for them. And if he's apologised for them and is deeply regretful and sincere in his apology, I think we have to move on. We can't keep beating him up for something that he's apologised for. It's a local association that would have chosen him. Sometimes people look at what the people have said. I don't know what the process was. All I know is what he said was reprehensible and completely inappropriate and ill-judged.
Ill-judged. Well, they were ill-judged, no doubt. You know, you could say they were clumsy comments. You might say they're disturbing comments. Listen, if you're at the point of penetration, you're actually at the point of penetration. It's just about to go in. And the woman says, I'd rather not actually. It's over. Go and jerk off or take a cold shower. End of story. End of story. This notion that once the knickers are off, it's open season. Well, no, she might still say, listen, maybe not. Maybe not. As for the spending plans, well, Labour promised that we would have an investment on a scale never seen before, and that would overhaul infrastructure in every area of the country. The Tories have said they'll spend hundreds of millions and billions and trillions as well, and the Chancellor, say it again, Rich. The Chancellor Sajid Javid, he said, we're not copying Labour, we're not copying them, we will practice sensible stewardship in charge if we are in charge. The Liberal Democrat Treasury spokesman, a guy called Ed Davey, he warned that the Tories and Labour were writing promises on cheques that will bounce. Yeah, nearly there, Ed Davey, nearly there. Maybe you might take a listen to this programme explaining how the financial system actually works. Now, for a little chat about anti-Semitism. Talked about it, of course, this morning on the newspaper review show, but it bears examination again this afternoon because it's important. Labour voters should now support Boris Johnson in the general election. That's according to the former Labour MP Ian Austin. You might have been in work and you might not be aware. This guy left the Labour Party back in February and he accused Jeremy Corbyn of not tackling anti-Semitism back then. He was the shadow minister. Ian Austin, parents fled Czechoslovakia, Jewish. He said that he has a heavy heart, but Labour voters should support Boris Johnson because Jeremy Corbyn isn't fit to lead. Now, he spoke with Sky News' Kay Burley this morning on Burley at Breakfast, or Kay Burley at Breakfast, and some interesting developments came out of that particular interview, and I think you should know. So have a listen. Here is Austin, Ian Austin, explaining himself on Sky News with the Ginger Ninja.
You know, I joined the Labour Party as a teenager in Dudley. I was a councillor there in my 20s. I worked for the party and for the Labour government in my 30s, and I became an MP and a government minister in my 40s. So this has been my life. This has been my life. I can't really believe it's come to this, but I've got to be honest with people. I think that Jeremy Corbyn is unfit to lead the Labour Party. I think he's certainly unfit to lead the country. The country faces a big choice. There's only two people who can be Prime Minister on December the 13th. And sadly, I've come to the conclusion that it can't be Jeremy Corbyn, and so on that basis, I think people should vote for Boris Johnson. And I think that this is a choice the British people face. And I could just disappear off back to Dudley, never say a word, keep quiet. But I think people in politics have got to stand up and tell the truth. And you've got to do what you think's right, however difficult it is.
Why do you think he's unfit to lead the country?
I think he spent, people like him and John McDonnell spent their whole time in politics, working with, defending, supporting all sorts of extremists, in some cases anti-Semites and terrorists. I think at every opportunity he backs our country's enemies, whether that's the IRA during the Troubles, or calling Hamas and Hezbollah his friends, or parroting Putin propaganda when the Russians sent hitmen to murder people on the streets of Britain. I think that, I don't think he loves this country. I don't think he's a patriot. I really don't, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
I've thought about this long and hard.
He's thought about it long and hard. He mentioned the Skripal poisoning story, and as far as I remember, which is obviously a nonsense anyway, the Skripals were not poisoned with Novichok by Russian agents. There is no evidence to support that. It's a pack of lies. Okay, Yulia Skripal and her father, Sergei Skripal, who used to work for Russian intelligence, he was a double agent. No evidence whatsoever. Corbyn refused to jump in and condemn Russia because there wasn't any, how do I put it, there wasn't any clear and, immutable evidence there, and that's all. Right, okay, so where does it go next? Kay Burley with Ian Austin, former Labour MP, today urging people to vote for Boris Johnson's Conservative Party.
But why nail your colours to the mast and say vote Conservative? I mean, the Conservatives are not without guilt when it comes to Islamophobia. The Prime Minister wrote an article which caused significant issues to women wearing burqas who had letters thrown at them when he described them as letterboxes. He's lied. He's been sacked twice for lying. Why would you support him?
Now, that's a good question, you might think. She's asked a good question there. You're walking away from... Well, you walked away back in February. She should make this clear, by the way, Burley. You know, what Sky did this morning was reprehensible. I explained this in the newspaper review programme. Sky deliberately gave the impression, wrongfully to its audience, that this guy had just left the Labour Party. He left in February. Now, it seems like a good question there. All right, you walk away from him and them because of bigotry. But what about Johnson and letterboxes and Islamophobia? Sounds good. But there's a question she should have asked about Ian Austin himself and his current political situation. And I'll make that clear in a minute, but she didn't. And it's unforgivable. Anyway, as to the point, why are you joining a party that's got its own problems with bigotry?
I'm not a Tory, and I'm not going to...
I'm not a Tory, he says. Again, she should jump in and say something, but she doesn't.
I'm not here to defend these things, and, you know...
But you are saying vote Conservative.
Yeah, but look, there's a choice there, isn't there? The country faces a choice. The British people have got to decide this.
There are other parties.
There's only two people who can be Prime Minister on December the 13th, Jeremy Corbyn or Boris Johnson. That is, in the end, the choice, Kay. It's not, look, I've agonised over this. I mean, this has been the toughest thing I've had to face up to and think about.
How long did it take you to decide?
Look, I've been thinking about this for a while. I decided finally... Well, we were delivering leaflets in Dudley over the weekend whilst I was still agonising over this decision.
Again, this is real fuckery, this. How long did it take you to decide? The impression is being created that the guy has just left the Labour Party. And he said, I've been delivering leaflets around Dudley. This guy who left the Labour Party in February. It's about 9 months ago. Is it 10 months ago? 9 months ago. So keep that in mind. There's a big question there that she isn't asking him. What could it be? We'll tell you in a minute. Here's the wrapping up of that interview with Burley.
If a political party has caused such huge offence and distress to one of Britain's communities, whose side are you on? Whose side are you on? When it comes to racism, I know what my responsibility is. This is a basic question of what's right and what's wrong. I think this is a really fundamental issue. And if you're not going to stand up and tell the truth and do what's right on something like racism, what are you going to do it on? What are you going to do it on?
Right, that was Ian Austin then, former Labour Party MP, who today has been telling people they should vote for Boris Johnson. John McDonnell, the shadow chancellor of the Exchequer, speaking today about his spending plans, where Labour or would Labour win the general election and form a government, McDonnell humiliated the BBC and Sky News, and he did it in 20 seconds. Here's John McDonnell.
Let me just say this about some of the statements made by a former Labour MP this morning.
Listen up.
He's now employed by the Tories. What else do you expect him to do in an election campaign where you're employed by the Tories, you speak on behalf of the Tories? That's what this was about this morning.
Hang on a second. He's employed by the Tories? Surely not. Well, surely yes, because in June of this year, Theresa May appointed him as the government's trade envoy to, I bet you'll never guess, to Israel. What kind of fuckery are Oh, Amy, this is pure fucking fuckery. Sky News producers would have known this morning that this guy who left the Labour Party in February was in the middle of the summer appointed as the government's trade envoy to Israel. Burley knew it, or her producer knew it, or Sky knew it, and they never asked him. This is a dereliction of duty beyond anything I've seen in 2019, and we've seen quite a bit. This is the stuff of nightmares for journalists like me who worked under some of the most ethically conscious men and women ever produced in my country, Ireland. I swear to God, and please believe me, in my time in radio in Ireland, if I had not asked, or my producer had not coaxed me to ask Ian Austin about being employed by the Conservative Party and whether that spoke to his motivation in urging people to vote for Boris Johnson, I would have been fucking fired. My feet would not have hit the ground. In my town, in my city, the backlash from the community would have been absolutely miserable. This is shocking stuff, this. This is beyond shocking. It's beyond a disgrace that at no point in that chat this morning did Burley say, and it's all she had to do, you are the government's trade envoy, right? Yo, what's that got to do with it, Kay? Well, I'll tell you what it's got to do with it there, Ian. Some people might say you would run down Jeremy Corbyn and you would urge people to vote for Boris Johnson. Maybe. Because maybe you'll keep that cushy fucking job, Ian. If the Conservative Party is returned to power, you'll have that lovely little gig as the government's trade envoy to Israel. Unbelievable. Sky and the BBC rammed it home this morning. Labour and Corbyn hate the Jews. Here's Melanie Phillips. She's a Jewish woman. She's on... Well, she's a journalist. You know Melanie Phillips. She's a journalist. She's Jewish. And she's on Sky News with Adam Bolton this morning. It was a free-for-all.
I do, however, have a reservation about a British Jew myself, as a British Jew myself, about this whole thing about Jeremy Corbyn's supposed anti-Semitism and the anti-Semitism of the Labour Party. And in my view, there's no question but that the Labour Party has become institutionally anti-Semitic, regardless whether individuals are. I make no comment about Jeremy Corbyn's personal views, but what they're supporting, the agenda they're supporting, and the kind of comments they've come up with, and more particularly their failure to shut it down, is exceptionally troubling. However,
what would you point to say this is?
Comments that are coming out, that have come out over the last few years from Labour Party supporters, calling Jews, saying that basically Jews run the world.
Well, saying that Jews run the world, Melanie, is a bit stupid, but it's not very harmful to Jewish people, is it? Suck it up, or just laugh and say, yes, we do. We do. Do you want a job? That's what I would say if I was Jewish. Of course, I could be Jewish, and I've thought long and hard about it just to make a point converting to Judaism. Honestly, I do know an Orthodox rabbi or two that are very friendly to the Richie Allen radio show. I'm going to convert to Judaism just to prove a point. But I'm not Jewish. But if I was Jewish, I'd say, yeah, of course we run the world. Tell you what, if you want a job, you know who to call. So that's stupid rather than hurtful. Next.
Well, Jews are responsible for skewing the foreign policy of the West.
Jews are not responsible for skewing the foreign policy of the West, but of course the Zionist state of Israel and its agents embedded in Western democracies, of course, skew the fucking policies of the West. Why didn't Adam Bolton jump in and say, Melanie, listen, sorry to interrupt you there mid-rant, but a Jewish embassy worker was caught with his trousers down on camera, Melanie, by Al Jazeera offering money, yes, to Labour people to try and get rid of politicians that are unfriendly to Israel. Do you remember that, Melanie? So to say that Jews, now of course Jews are just people, believers in God Almighty, but to say that Israel is not working actively to skew foreign policy decision making in Western democracies is a bit fucking stupid, Melanie, because you've been caught with your trousers down, not you, love, but Israel, time and again. You see? But of course Adam Bolton either doesn't know this or he hasn't got testiculae. Testiculae, those two little roundy things just below your penis. That's all you have to say, Adam. Hang on, Melanie. So there's two that are not great. What about the third thing?
In favour of Israel. Much of this is to do with Israel. A lot of confusion, therefore, about whether it's legitimate to criticise Israel.
It's always legitimate to criticise Israel.
Of course it is, but
oh, thanks for that.
It goes over the line if you start saying that Israel has...
if it goes over the line. No Israeli and no Jew has the right, By the way, I should say Jewish Zionist. No Zionist, nor any Israeli, has the right to set the parameters for criticism of Israel. You don't get to do that, love. I'm sorry. I will criticise Israel. I don't mean me personally, but me as a human being, anybody, however I feel like doing it. You're not going to tell me, this is the framework. These are the guidelines. Fuck off. I'll say what I want. All right. What does she say next?
Has no right to exist.
Israel doesn't have any right to exist. This is a historical fact. It's not a anti-Semitic trope. It has no right to exist.
You are identifying that as one country as the only country for whom that is likely.
But did you ask me? Is Israel the only country that I think has no right to exist? No, you haven't. Because if you asked me, I could reel off one or two more. I'd say Northern Ireland, for example, has no fucking right to exist. Historically, none. It's my country. It's the country of my people. There should be a united Ireland. Peacefully, of course. We'll breed the fuckers out up there, the unionists. Right, okay, I jest. But we don't make that claim specifically for Israel. Of course, Israel has no right to exist. Anyway, next.
A Nazi country, calling Jews...
A Nazi country? Well, okay. That might be a little bit much to call it a Nazi country. Because there are a lot of Israelis who are appalled and sickened by the actions of their police and of their military. I wouldn't call it a Nazi country, but I would say that the government of Israel and its agencies act in a way that you could say is tantamount to Nazism. I think that's fair enough, I would say.
Jews, Nazis, identifying Jews with the Holocaust, denying the Holocaust, these things go over a line. No question in my mind. But
yeah, denying the Holocaust, fair enough. You know, I understand why that would piss people off. Melanie Phillips there. Imagine she said to Bolton, claiming that Israel skews the foreign policy of other countries, is an anti-Semitic trope, and Israel has been caught doing this so many times. And Adam Bolton sits there with his mouth completely firmly shut. I'm not getting involved, says Adam Bolton. I'm not getting involved with the Jews or Israel or Zionists. I'll just keep my mouth shut.
That's been happening. However, the Conservative Party, in order to win this election, has, in my view, weaponised the Jewish community, has weaponised anti-Semitism. And if one is concerned to damp down anti-Semitism, then I do have my doubts about whether, if people think, it's the Jews who are going to prevent Jeremy Corbyn from becoming Prime Minister, or if you're a Brexit supporter, well, I can't support either Boris's deal or Nigel Farage in case Jeremy Corbyn comes to power. I'm being told, therefore, that in order to stop anti-Semitism, I can't have Brexit. That's not going to play very well for the Jewish community.
Melanie Phillips, now, we're going to leave this subject in a couple of minutes, but there's a very important thing I want to share with you before we do. Excuse me. Listen to this. Later in the day, this has been covered extensively today, everywhere. Later in the day, Sky reporter, now remember, Sky reporter, working for Sky, a woman called Diana Magnay, she's well known, used to work for CNN. Diana Magnay, working for Sky now, covering the Labour campaign, she spoke to her studio anchor about this subject. Listen very carefully to what she says, a reporter.
And today we have also had an extremely strongly worded front page from the Jewish Chronicle outlining the Jewish community's concerns about Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, saying that they believe that he is an anti-Semite and urging non-Jews to really consider whether they should vote for Labour. Chris Williamson too, who was expelled from the party, and the NEC deciding yesterday not to readmit him, has also written a letter which includes some widely considered to be anti-Semitic tropes in it.
Yeah, right, I'm not going to say anything. She then cut to a clip of John McDonnell and then she came back.
So clearly, day 2 of the campaign, yesterday Jeremy Corbyn, when he was asked about his very, very low approval ratings, they are down at a 40-year low for any Labour leader, said, I don't comment on opinion polls, but when you consider the fact that we've had these very damning comments from 2 former Labour MPs, it is going to be very hard for him to shy away from the questions over his leadership abilities and the continuing shadow of anti-Semitism which hangs over him, and whether he considers himself personally to blame for the fact that the Jewish community, the Jewish vote, will not be behind Labour in this election.
Wow. That's beyond editorialising there. What Diana Magnay did, it's beyond it. She's actually not reporting back to the studio. She's editorialising on steroids. She's basically saying the Jewish vote is abandoning Labour, and I was very interested in that. She looked a little bit nervous doing the reports back. I hadn't seen Magnay report for Sky of late, and a little bit of research led me to find, and if you want to put this into a search engine, you'll find it yourself. Diana Magnay has been repeatedly criticised by the State of Israel and by Zionist groups here and in the United States for her reporting on Israel in the past, to the point that she's been berated in the streets by Israelis. She's been called scum by Israelis. She's been called crazy woman by various people connected with the State of Israel and former Israeli governments. She was known as a reporter that would report in a way that didn't reflect very well on Israel when she was working for CNN. Now she's working for Sky. She's basically editorialising. You wonder. I'll just leave that one hanging there. The only person to stick up for Jeremy Corbyn on Sky today was the filmmaker Ken Loach. That's where we'll leave this. Here's Ken Loach with Adam Bolton. He was asked about the decision of Ian Austin, the former Labour MP, to say we should vote for Boris Johnson because Jeremy Corbyn isn't fit to lead. Here's Ken Loach, the filmmaker who's got a brand new film out now.
I think that's nonsense. I think, well, I hope you do, and I'm sure you do, talk to the many Jewish members who say absolutely the opposite, that Labour is a safe party for Jews, for everyone.
Well, we've seen a lot of people leave. I mean, Louise Ellman, Luciana Berger. I mean, these are people inside the party. Well, they would know, wouldn't they?
Yes, I mean, for certain, I know the constituency of people in the Louise Ellman's constituency, and they were very unhappy with her as an MP for quite other reasons. But I think there's so many Jewish people who say absolutely the opposite, and they don't get a fair hearing, in all fairness. But you've read the book, I'm sure, by the senior academics, led by Professor Greg Filer at Glasgow University, called Labour, Anti-Semitism and Public Opinion.
I also read Labour's Jewish Problem, which is another one.
But the book I'm talking about...
He's a snidey bastard, isn't he, Bolton? I've also read Labour's Jewish Problem. Listen to what Loach is telling you. He's educating you here.
Talking about, it's rigorous academic research. It's not arguing one side or the other.
Shut up and let him explain it.
Why do you think
can I say why it's important?
Yeah.
Good man.
Because there's one fact in it that we really mustn't miss. And that is they found that the average person in the street thinks that 34% of Labour Party members have been accused of anti-Semitism.
This is amazing. Loach is referring to an academic paper which has been peer-reviewed. And the academics found that the average man on the streets, the average man or woman, they understand that 34% of people have got some problem with Jews. Now, the academics found the reason for this is because of the media's biased reporting on Israel and anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. It's astonishing that the average bloke, the average woman, thinks that 34% is the number. Listen to Loach.
34%. The real number, as you will know, is less than 0.1.
Less than 0.1.
And that's the accusations. And that, of course, when you look at the evidence, many of those have been dropped. So it is an actually infinitesimal issue.
Brilliant. Loach is saying the average man or woman thinks that the Labour Party has got a problem. 34% of its members, 34% of people connected with Labour have got negative feelings about Jews or they're anti-Semitic. It's a lie. It goes unchallenged through the basic, the average news organisations, Channel 4, ITV, BBC, Sky, so on, the newspapers. It just goes unchallenged. But it's a lie. It's actually 0.1% of the entire Labour membership is supposed to have some negative antipathy towards Jews. Good man, Ken Loach.
And the campaign has exaggerated it in the public mind. And I think the more traction that is given to it, the more it is disproportionate.
Well, the problem is Mr. Corbyn himself, the party leader, is seen as emblematic of...
Well, because of this campaign. But I have to say one other thing, which is really important in this context, is that every allegation of anti-Semitism or racism, including anti-Semitism, must be rigorously examined. If it is found and the defence heard, and it should be open so that everyone can hear the evidence, and if people are found responsible for any form of racism or anti-Semitism, they should be sanctioned. I mean, no question. I don't think anyone would give any quarter on that. But look at the reality of the campaign. Read that book by Greg Philo and 5 others, very senior academics, published by Pluto, and that's the facts.
I swear to God, that's the facts. I swear to God, at that point, Bolton ended the interview. Now, okay, he's got a schedule, Bolton. He's got 6 or 7 different guests. And it's very tight on commercial and national television. It's tight. So I'm not saying for sure that they wanted to get rid of Loach, but it looked a bit abrupt to me. Are we going to leave it there? We are. That subject, I know you're sick of it. I know. Right, listen, we're going to take some music. This is the Richie Allen Show, by the way. It is Thursday, November 7th, 2019. I'm Richie Allen. I'm flying solo today. Sorry about that. Tough shit, Paddy. That's the way it goes. This is Billy Ocean, by the way.
Get into my car. Yes, you.
Very misogynistic, this. She mightn't want to get into that car, you know. Thanks for all the tweets thus far today. Billy Ocean there. Get out of my dreams. Get into my car. Misogynistic bastard Billy Ocean there. Welcome back to the programme. Thanks for all the tweets. Really appreciate them. Hi to William in Bonnie, Scotland. Yeah, I know. Every accent sounds the same. I know. Hi to Chris Morell. How you doing, Chris? Chris, thanks for the nice tweet there. But Sky News, Beth Rigby and everybody else, they've known for a long time that Ian Austin was appointed as the government's trade envoy to Israel because Theresa May gave him the gig. And he stands to keep the gig in the likelihood, or in the event, maybe not the likelihood, that Boris Johnson becomes Prime Minister. You couldn't make it up. Hi to Faisal, who says, I wonder if this is strange kind of double bluff strategy to get people to vote for Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, it worked with Project Fear and Obama telling us to vote Remain. It certainly distracts from the awfulness of both candidates, says Faisal. That's an interesting point, Faisal. I can't dismiss that, my friend. I don't know. Hi to Paul. How you doing, Paul Alawi? Hi to John Stott. Mr. Sarah Stott. You never say that. So you don't say Mr. Richie. You don't say Mr. Richie Tisserand. You don't say that. You say Mrs. Caroline Allen. John and Sarah Stott. John says the only surprise is that Melanie Phillips managed to get through an interview without demanding that Iran be set on fire. Crackpot, says Paul. Melanie Phillips, yeah. Yeah, feisty, says Jean Ann. Feisty, yeah. Hi to Patrick Vidian. What a dickhead this Ian Austin is. Talk about complete absence of the truth and a completely ignorant perspective suggestive of a cabal agent / puppet, says Patrick. Hi to David Stanford. How you doing, David? Hi to Charlotte Binns in Burnley. How you doing, Charlotte? To Paul Paranite and to Liz Jones, listening into the Richie Allen radio show. Here's a story for you, eh? These stories, you see, they come at you thick and fast. And I know that when you do them, when you read them, when you shine a light on them, and when you discuss them, that some people think, oh, you're just making a big deal out of one example. But it's not an example. It's not an isolated thing. This is becoming the norm. We're going to have a new segment on the Richie Allen Show, and I am dubbing it I am hereby calling it, they live amongst us. They live amongst us. Meaning Muppets. This is a story in the Mail, and I've traced it, I've looked at it, and I've chased it around other areas, and it's happening quite a bit. You ready? Couldn't make it up. You ready? Aggressive animal rights activists targeting blind people for keeping guide dogs that they claim should be running free in the fields.
What kind of fuckery is this?
Yeah. Blind people are going down the road, and these shaggy-haired, dirty, scruffy bastards with their filthy dreadlocks that haven't been washed in years are saying to blind people that they shouldn't have a guide dog. Honest to God. This is how it's going now. And it's younger people, of course. Yeah, of course it is. It's students. It's animal rights activists working on studying on campuses around the country are asking blind people, sometimes aggressively, to consider not having the guide dog. Did anybody ask the guide dog, was he up for it? Did they? Did he sign a contract, did he? Did he agree to it, did he? Did he agree to guide you through the streets of Slough? Of Cleethorpes? No? You hateful, animal, torturing bastard, you. Blind guy's just blind, you know. I'm just blind, and they said to me, here's a golden retriever. She's lovely. She's very intelligent. She'll be your friend for life. And when you need to go outside to go across the street to have a bet in the bookies or to go and get a cup of tea in the cafe, she'll make sure that you don't get hit by a 25-ton fucking articulated lorry. That's what they said to me, Swampy. And Swampy is saying, it's terrible, it's animal abuse. What do you do with people like that? How does violence not become inevitable? You know? Jesus, huh? What do they want blind people to do? Do they want them to learn Jediism? To channel the fucking Force? You know? God almighty. I've looked at this from every angle. Because I spoke to you on the radio show before about debating, how I loved, when I was younger, being asked to debate something I didn't agree with. I loved that. I didn't at the very beginning. At the very beginning I didn't, because I was full of self-righteousness. No, I couldn't possibly argue that, whatever. I couldn't possibly argue that Northern Ireland belongs to the UK. I was asked to argue that before, and to make a case that it was better off in the UK. I didn't like it, but I did it anyway. This was in a debate years ago. So I've been looking at this. Can I make an argument that guide dogs are somehow under duress or are, being abused because they are coupled with a blind man or woman? And I can't. And I can argue I could start an argument in an empty room, me. I just can't figure out how I could make an argument. So help me out here on Twitter. Help me make a cogent and plausible argument that it's animal abuse to have a guide dog. Please, I'd love to find out. This is not a joke, by the way. Imagine this level of wokeness now. One woman had to be dragged away in a pub by her husband. A young woman who's an animal rights activist was getting so animated and so shouty at a poor blind dude who's having half a pint of mild. He's having half a pint of mild. If you're not from the north of England, you won't know what the hell mild is. You southern muppets! Find out what a half a pint of mild is. Having a half a pint of mild, minding his own business, this crazy bastard comes over to him and starts giving him shit, to the point that her husband had to drag her out of the pub. A guy with a golden retriever. And the dog is presumably just lying there going, what in the name of Jesus is going on here? They're wonderful. Retrievers and German Shepherds and Labradors. They're wonderful. They're easy to train. And they love it. And they really enjoy it. They enjoy fetching things. Hence retriever, for fuck's sake. That's why people who are wheelchair bound find them wonderfully helpful. Dog loves it. Dog needs to be engaged. The mind needs to be engaged. Problem solving. Jazz, not trained like that, but Jazz is very well trained. And she wasn't trained by shouting at her and abusing her. She was trained by the reward system. Very good Jazz. Stays with me. Doesn't run across roads. Does what she's told in the park. Won't go chasing other dogs. Love it. Love being involved. Love chasing things. And the idea is among some animal rights activists, and this is gathering steam, this, according to a number of journalists, that even the disabled person who needs the dog to sometimes go to the fridge or to pick something up or to answer the phone sometimes, I'm not joking by the way, or to call somebody or to pick up the phone in the event of an emergency, animal rights activists are saying this is cruelty. I can't, Jesus Christ. It's 9 minutes to the top of the hour. I'm going to finish with this today, forgive me. Maybe the bump on the noggin has affected me maybe a little bit. What's the Global Citizen Festival? Do you know? Have you heard of it? Well, it's been recently announced that there will be a Global Citizen Festival late next year to coincide with a meeting of the UN General Assembly. They're saying it's going to be the biggest concert of all time, ever. It's going to dwarf Live Aid. It's going to make Live Aid look like two guys in the back of a van, is what they're saying. Everybody's going to be involved. Metallica, Billie Eilish, Coldplay, Miley Cyrus, Alicia Keys, modern artists and old guys like Ozzy Osbourne. They're all going to be there. And it's all about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Listen carefully, this is very dangerous stuff. And please check out Mark Windows. WindowsOnTheWorld.net. Jesus. WindowsOnTheWorld.net. Sandy Adams, Mark Windows, Piers Corbyn. That's Piers, Jeremy's brother. They are verifiable experts on what this really means. It sounds so beautiful. It sounds so harmless. It sounds so benevolent, doesn't it? United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It's terrifying. This is Agenda 20, Agenda 30. And they want the whole world to know about this, and they want the whole world to comply with it. So next year, massive concert. Right? Now, Sky News spoke to two people behind this today. Let me just grab my notes. I had to write it down, you know. Let me grab my notes. Imagine that, blind guide dogs, eh? Cruelty to animals. Right, so this global concert next year, the whole world's going to watch it. And it'll be on in loads of different places. It'll be on in Nigeria. It'll be on in New York. It'll be on in London, Latin America, simultaneous concerts like Live Aid, to remind us all of our responsibilities to realise the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is terrifying for everybody in the world. No, it really is. So anyway, to discuss this on Sky today, you had the CEO of Global Citizen. Global Citizen's a scary enough name on its own, isn't it? Global Citizen, huh? A guy called Hugh Evans, and the CEO of Teneo, a guy called Declan Kelly. I think, so I do, that you'll hear Hugh Evans, the CEO of Global Citizen, first. Listen carefully. Talking about this concert and why they're doing it.
Well, firstly, thank you so much for having us on the programme, Colin. So, Global Goal Live, The Possible Dream, is going to be broadcast all around the world. It's going to be physically situated in 5 continents. There's going to be a show in Latin America, North America, here in Europe, also across Africa and across Asia. And we're working on a multi-pronged broadcast strategy across terrestrial, radio, across digital, OTT, even the likes of telecommunications companies around the world are streaming to get it right down to people's cell phone devices so that it could become the most watched cause event in human history. It's going to take place on September 26 of 2020 during the UN General Assembly meeting. And the goal is really focused on achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. 17 goals with 169 indicators designed to end extreme poverty and tackle climate change by 2030.
Yeah.
Declan, is this just about raising a profile, sharing an idea, or
climate change, eh? So that was your man Hugh from Global Citizen. Now we'll hear the Irish guy from Teneo. Listen to him.
Idea, or is also, I'm guessing there has to be an intention to monetize it a little bit, whether that's through ticket sales, whether it's through selling rights, and because of the rights for this, I'm guessing the numbers could be large.
Well, first of all, the intention is to drive action against the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is the entire mission of Global Citizen. Teneo's involvement as the partner in driving this, and Hugh and I doing it together, is to raise awareness inside the corporate community all over the world, including here in the UK, but also all over Europe and all over the United States and every continent in the world, which is why we're doing this in 5 continents at the same time. So the goal is to actually get companies, corporations, high net worth individuals, philanthropists, and of course, most importantly, governments, to make actionable commitments against the UN Sustainable Development Goals. because $350 billion per year for the next 10 years is required to eradicate global poverty, to fix the problem of systemic climate change, and to do all the things that are named in those global development goals in the 59 poorest countries in the world. So the mission of this event is to raise awareness of that, but to force people to take action against it.
You heard that, did you? Don't know if you did hear it, but you might have heard it. You hear that?
But to force people to take action against it.
To what?
But to force people to take action against it.
Say that again?
But to force people to take action against it.
To force people. Now, Mark Windows, Sandy Adams and Piers Corbyn do an amazing job explaining how this works at a local level. And not to put too fine a point on it, because I'm running out of time now, what this means is, it means smart communities, urban settlement zones, no living on the land, no living on the coasts, an unimaginable change in the way you live, in the way you travel, in the way you eat, in the way you interact with your fellow human beings. This is full spectrum lockdown. It really is. And when this was first doing the rounds, I mean, this goes back to the 1970s. It goes back further. Again, Mark Windows is brilliant on this. But when it was doing the rounds about 4 years ago, the Tea Party, do you remember the Tea Party movement in America? They were ridiculed and mocked and lampooned because of some of the claims they were making back in 2014 about what this would mean for people in the future. They were laughed at and called conspiracy theorists. But at that time in 2014, they weren't saying the things that they're saying now. Now they're talking about change in human habitation, human settlement zones, people living in much smaller spaces, not eating what you're not supposed to eat, taking your cars off the road whether you like it or not, ending cash as a means of transaction, bringing in a social credit score for people to make sure that people comply. I'm not making any of this up. It's all true. And we will be focusing on this in the coming weeks and months on the Richie Allen Radio Show with men and women from academia around the world, because this is the next big thing. And we have to talk about it. And it's based, as my great friend and colleague Jean Ann Crowley is saying to me now, on a whopper of a lie. The lie that CO2 created by us through our work, through manufacturing, through industrial activity, is somehow going to bring about cataclysmic and catastrophic climate change. It isn't. There's no evidence to support it. But there never was meant to be any evidence to support it, because the people behind it know that it's untrue. They know. This is about depopulation and dramatically changing the human experience for those of us that are left. Thanks for being with me today. I'll take my leave of you today. I'll be back with you on Sunday morning for Sunday View. Got some shows lined up for you next week. Mark Boyerski returns to the Richie Allen Show. An amazing woman called Finola Moss will join me on Tuesday. Finola would have been on with me tonight, but I asked her to put it off till Tuesday. There's so much in what she's going to say. Look, have a great weekend. Share the show when you see it coming, when you come across it on social media. Look after yourselves and one another. And I'm going to leave you with some Simply Red to close out Thursday's programme. Have a good one. Speak on Sunday. Until then, bye from me. Bye now.